That may be the greatest catch I've ever seen in my life.
Now, I think that this is going to be a way more important video than what we actually have when we're talking about our must draft players, because really, there are few instances where you can go out and you can identify a player and go, okay, well, we're 100% sure this is going to be a league winner coming into the season. However, I think that it's actually a lot easier to go through and say, well, this player is being way overdrafted. They don't fit our roster construction and what we're trying to accomplish whatsoever. They don't have the floor ceiling combo that we're looking for. We should most likely be avoiding them in this range, and we can increase our win rate that way. So I honestly think that the must avoid videos are significantly more valuable, because I think it's going to allow you to dodge these landmines and maybe some low upside players in your drafts this upcoming season. And of course, guys, this is 100% about cost. This is 100% about where they're going in 2021 fantasy drafts. Now, if you're playing in a league where one of these players falls 2-3 rounds in their ADP, maybe they fall about 4 or 5 picks in there at the very top of the draft, you go, okay, well, this is a completely different opportunity cost. Here we can actually look at this player and go, okay, well, maybe the upside floor scenario does make sense. But of course, before we get into this, guys, make sure you go down to the comment section. And if you see anything you do not agree with me in this video, give me your argument. Give me your side on the story on what I am missing here, because there are going to be a lot of other people watching this video that may think the same exact thing as you, and they'll go down there and they'll see your side of the story in the comment section. Drop a like, subscribe to the channel. Y'all know we are going to continue to make videos every single day, continue to live stream every single night. So make sure you are hitting that subscribe button. And lastly, if you want access to our 2021 fantasy football rankings, if you want access to our tiers, if you want access to our 2021 fantasy football draft guide, our 2021 dynasty rookie draft guide, if you want to get into drafts with us this upcoming season, it's literally the easiest thing you could ever do. Hundreds of pages of information. I mean, all for just a $10 deposit on Underdog Fantasy. That's where we're drafting in those live streams every single night. And when you make that $10 deposit, you're actually getting $25 added to your account at the same time. So this deal, when you use promo code FLOCK on Underdog Fantasy, link in the description, you are literally getting paid $25 to go do fantasy drafts. You're literally getting my rankings. You're getting my tiers. Do not miss out on this. Make sure you take advantage. And let's go through. Let's talk about Kyle Pitts. So here with Kyle Pitts, he's going to be my #1 must avoid player. And I mean, I'm pretty much basing this off of guys that I haven't been drafting at all. Y'all know that I'm closing in on about 200 real money fantasy drafts so far this season. So, I mean, with a Kyle Pitts, this is a scenario that I'm like, okay, well, the price doesn't make sense with where he is currently going. I mean, if we're looking at those underdog drafts that we are doing every single night, consistently, you are seeing Kyle Pitts as a 4th round selection. You are seeing him, and this is the problem in my opinion, you're seeing him go an entire round before TJ Hawkinson. You're seeing him go an entire round before Mark Andrews. Both tight ends that I actually have ranked ahead of Kyle Pitts. And I mean, I don't necessarily think that it's that controversial, to be honest, in that, yes, Kyle Pitts is one of, if not the best tight end prospect of all time. Kyle Pitts is a fantastic tight end prospect, but we know a couple things with the tight end position. Not only is the tight end position coming into the NFL historically proven to be the hardest position to evaluate and the hardest position to project what we are going to see throughout their career. Not only do we have that factor with the tight end, but at the same time, I mean, it's a position where I swear to God, we have learned this lesson 100 times. You do not invest into those rookie tight ends, as they do not historically pan out. And to go along with all of this, there has never, and I repeat, ever in a million years, been a rookie tight end going nearly as high as this. We know that rookie tight ends have very bad historical hit rates when usually you have the #1 tight end in the class going in the double-digit rounds. They're usually getting them as the tight end 2. Just think about where Pat Frymuth is currently going in drafts this season. That's usually where those rookie tight ends go. That's where Cole Kmet was going last year. But the problem is, so many people, for good reason, are excited about Kyle Pitts to the point where they're willing to overlook all of those negative red flags. They're willing to go out here and they're willing to say, well, you know what? I want the best tight end prospect of all time. I want him on my roster, and I'm not going to be surprised in the slightest if Kyle Pitts starts out slow this year. He's a tight end that you may not be able to start through the first 6-8 weeks. Then you're just having to roster 2 tight ends on your team, which of course we don't want to have to do. And then all of a sudden, by the time we get to the fantasy playoffs, I mean, he has a full-on breakout. That is very possible. But what I'm saying with Kyle Pitts is, why would you go out there and draft him? And why would you not instead take a TJ Hawkinson? take a Mark Andrews. And then we are very confident that Hockenson and Andrews will be more productive at the beginning of the season. And then if you really do want Kyle Pitts, well, hell, don't take Kyle Pitts an entire round ahead of those other tight ends. Take the other tight ends, then trade them for Kyle Pitts plus an extra piece once we're a month into the season and we're expecting that the rookie tight end is probably going to start a little slower. And also, Andrews and Hockenson, they're both ascending at the same time. So I know y'all are tired of hearing me talk about Kyle Pitts. We won't necessarily talk about him that much, but let's go over and let's talk about a Mike Davis. And now here with Mike Davis, I mean, this is a running back that if you pull up my running back rankings, it's laughable how much lower I am compared to consensus on a Mike Davis. I prefer a couple other running backs here. I prefer someone like a Myles Gaskin. I prefer, hear me out on this one, a Chase Edmonds. And that with the Mike Davis, while I understand the positives about it, while I understand that he was a very successful in the Christian McCaffrey role that he had last year with the Christian McCaffrey injury, what we also have to acknowledge is the fact that that was a team that had no plans on going through and building around their running back depth going into the season with Carolina. So very similar to what you had in Jacksonville last year. Whenever you actually have that running back getting vaulted up to the starting job, there's literally no depth there whatsoever. I mean, that's all of a sudden why James Robinson is getting a top 5 workload in the NFL, even though he's on the league's worst offense, even though he's an undrafted free agent. And now here with the Mike Davis, there are a couple things going on. A, people are just riding high based on the waiver wire league winner that they got last year. B, people are way too confident in how they think they can project a running back throughout the entire season. I will be completely willing to admit that Mike Davis may actually look like a very good option at the beginning of the season. But the problem is we know how volatile those running backs that we don't perceive have the elite talent. I mean, how volatile that projection actually has been season to season. I mean, this has been a story that's played itself out in fantasy football for probably, I want to say 15 years now. I mean, it's always the running back that comes out of nowhere, the running back that wasn't getting drafted anywhere close to where he goes the following season. That is the waiver wire darling. Then all of a sudden, he actually finds his way into projected opportunity, and then he fails with that projected opportunity. And what we have to also understand is I'd be a lot more willing to go through and to buy into the Mike Davis profile if it was just like Myles Gaskin. I mean, we look at Myles Gaskin, still relatively young. We look at Chase Edmonds, still relatively young. And we're going, okay, well, I mean, these are running backs that, well, yeah, I mean, they haven't done anything up until this point. They didn't do anything up until 2020. I mean, at least we understand why. At least we understand that they were going through and they were progressing in their NFL careers. However, a Mike Davis, I mean, he is like the oldest running back that you are going to see go in the top 5 rounds of your draft. And I know a lot of people hate when I bring up age, but guys, it's been proven mathematically, historically, whatever you want to say, that investing in running backs that are going to be the age of Mike Davis this upcoming season, it's not a good bet historically. And I'm not going to be expecting Arthur Smith to come over and bring the exact offense from Tennessee. It's not like they're going to be treating Mike Davis like Derrick Henry. If they try to treat Mike Davis like Derrick Henry, Mike Davis is probably going to break in half the 3rd week this upcoming season. So Mike Davis, I mean, give me a wide receiver in that range. Give me like a T. Higgins. Give me anybody like that, just avoiding fragility of what you're going to have with that running back projected volume in the 5th round. Mike Davis is not the profile you want to be chasing. Now, going to our next player, I mean, talking about Arthur Smith using someone as Derrick Henry. Derrick Henry is going to be our guy. And here with Derrick Henry, guys, trust me, I understand. I mean, you could make the argument that Derrick Henry is the most talented running back in the entire NFL. However, I'm going to go through and I'm going to make the argument I've been making all offseason now and saying that in a full PPR format, for you to go and to select Derrick Henry 3rd overall, it's the craziest thing I've ever seen. Now, I will say, a lot of people have actually gotten a little smarter with this. Now you're seeing Alvin Kamara consistently go ahead of Derrick Henry, where that wasn't the case a month ago. So I want to give a bravo to everybody for realizing that Alvin Kamara is a significantly better option in a PPR format than a Derrick Henry. And it's simple math here, guys. I hate breaking this down because I understand that looking at a running back running for 2,000 yards, you go, oh my God, of course I'm taking that in the 1st round every time. Well, I have to just let everyone know that fantasy football is not fair. Fantasy football, it does not necessarily show, okay, this is the most successful running back in the NFL. He's going to be the most successful running back in fantasy. Because we understand, you do some simple math here. We know running backs like an Alvin Kamara, like a Saquon Barkley. These guys that can average 7 targets per game, just say they convert those over to 5 receptions a game. Say Saquon Barkley gets 5 receptions a game compared to Derrick Henry's I don't want to say one, but one. That's going to be a 4-point per game difference just based off receptions. Now you throw in the receiving yards as well. We can naturally assume that, Barkley is going to have like 40, 30 more receiving yards per game than Derrick Henry. I think that's a very safe assessment. Let's just call it 35 more receiving yards per game. Then all of a sudden we're giving Barkley, just in the receiving game alone, not even including receiving touchdowns, 7.5 more points per game than Derrick Henry. And I understand, guys, Henry is a fantastic running back. Trust me, I get it. But at the same time, that 7.5 points per game difference, that translates to 75 rushing yards a game. That is massive. It breaches the gap to a point where you're going, okay, well, even if the offensive line's horrendous for Saquon Barkley, even if Alvin Kamara is seeing the quarterback change, with the Derrick Henry, I don't see the upside for him to finish as the running back one in fantasy. Out of all those running backs going in the first round, we could easily draw out a case for Christian McCaffrey. Everybody knows that. Dalvin Cook, everybody knows that. We've already seen it with Alvin Kamara. We've already seen Saquon Barkley get close to that mark his rookie season based on what he's going to get in the red zone, as well as the usage in the receiving game. To go along with this, Ezekiel Elliott playing in an offense that could just have an absurd amount of trips to the red zone. We've seen Ezekiel Elliott. He's gone out there and he's actually averaged 4 or 5 receptions a game before in his NFL career. So all of a sudden, Derrick Henry, who finished with over 2,000 rushing yards last season, he finishes the running back 3 on a points per game basis. He hit his ceiling. He's 27 years old. Maybe he rushes for 2,000 rushing yards again. Well, congrats. You took on an unnecessary risk so you can draft a running back at 3rd overall for him to finish as the running back 3. You're not even going to make a very high profit based off that selection. I think that if Derrick Henry makes it to you at the 108, the 107, there, I'm fine. Go get Derrick Henry. But when we're seeing teams consistently draft him at the 103, 104, I can't make that pick. Hey, give me Barkley. Give me Ezekiel Elliott. I know a lot of people are going to hate hearing that, but fantasy football is not fair. And that's all I have to say about it. Now, our next player, another guy that does not catch passes. Let's go with the Gus Edwards. And here with Gus Edwards, obviously, he gets the massive bump up with the J.K. Dobbins injury. And my initial reaction was, okay, we have to move Gus Edwards up to the Josh Jacobs tier. And I think that, honestly, that's about a fair range. But based on what I've seen with him going a little beyond the point where I feel comfortable, I think currently Gus Edwards is not going to be the play in a PPR format because very similar to a Derrick Henry, he's not going to be a player that's getting much usage whatsoever in the receiving game. Nobody's going to be surprised if Gus Edwards doesn't even average a reception per game. And I know it sucks to say, but at the end of the day, he can only be so efficient on the ground. He can only handle so many carries because we know they're not using Gus Edwards as a 3-down running back. They're going to go through in their, I don't want to say going to use a committee, but we have seen them use a committee time and time again. We have seen them with Mark Ingram also go out there and roll out Gus Edwards. We have seen them with J.K. Dobbins or Gus Edwards be the running back 1A, be the running back 1B last season. There's nothing that tells us that they're going to be willing to change that. So if we're all of a sudden going to be drafting a running back that's less dynamic than J.K. Dobbins, he's not an elite level athlete that we know is not as good of a pass catcher as a J.K. Dobbins. We also understand that it's still going to be a committee. While yes, Gus Edwards definitely has to raise up in your fantasy football rankings, if he's going in the 5th round, I can't take him. If he falls to you in the 6th or 7th, then sure, go for it. But I've seen him being going in the 5th, and I can't draft him in the 5th round. Now let's go to our next guy. It's going to be a DeVonta Smith. And here with Smith, I will say that I was a little more excited just about a month ago. Remember the Deshaun Watson rumors to Philadelphia, and with the DeVonta Smith, if Deshaun Watson ended up getting traded to Philly, I would actually have been willing to rank him as maybe a top 20 wide receiver overall this upcoming season, maybe a top 18 receiver. He would have definitely been in that 4th round consideration for me. But now that we have it locked and loaded that Jalen Hurts is going to be the starting quarterback this upcoming year, well, I'm going to be completely honest. I love Jalen Hurts for fantasy football because with Jalen Hurts, going back to what we were saying in fantasy football not being real life football and that fantasy football isn't fair, we have seen Lamar Jackson break football before with his rushing upside. And now we actually saw, yes, in a very small sample. A small sample doesn't necessarily say it's going to translate over the entire season, but we have seen Jalen Hurts put up a similar rushing ceiling to a Lamar Jackson in the back half of 2020. Now, with this being said, now, we also have NFL team defenses now having tape on a Jalen Hurts. So naturally, you're going to expect that they'll be able to go through and maybe stop some of the cheap plays that he was pulling off. And to go along with this, just go over to Baltimore. Look at how productive you've actually seen those receivers over the past few years. They're not necessarily in a range dictated by the overall passing volume that you have on the offense that you can all of a sudden say, okay, well, this is a bona fide wide receiver 2. No, we made that mistake with Hollywood Brown. We have already been there. And now to go along with this, knowing on a low passing volume offense, you're going to have both Zach Ertz and Dallas Goedert, and they're running a ton of 12 personnel. I think that this is going to be a run-first offense. I think that they're going to see a ton of targets go to the tight end position, and I don't necessarily want to be going through and drafting the wide receiver 1 there. So if you can get him as your wide receiver 4, I'm fine with it. But if you're drafting him as your wide receiver 3, which is where he's currently going, I don't necessarily like that selection because I think he's going to be someone that you can't start for the first half of the season. While maybe this can be a potential buy low candidate halfway in, if we're thinking we're going to rookie breakout at the end of the year, I at least can't draft them to start the season. Okay, so now let's go over and let's talk about the best player in the NFL. Let's talk about Patrick Mahomes. And I was very hesitant to go through and include Mahomes on this list, but I've done so many drafts, and y'all have heard me in the live streams come out and say, I mean, the number one thing that I try to accomplish over the past few weeks is try to find a way to make Mahomes work at the 3-4 turn. Because a lot of drafts, that's where he's falling to. And I'll say, if you're playing in a casual format where we know Patrick Mahomes, if you're playing with your high school buddies or something, they're taking Mahomes in the first round, you're rolling your eyes at this. You go, of course, we're not drafting Mahomes. But even in those higher stakes leagues where people know that quarterbacks shouldn't be going that early, I mean, when he's going at the 3-4 turn, I've tried to make it work out. I've tried to go through and get him Mahomes, understanding that this is a quarterback with a higher floor than anybody else in the NFL, because we know when he's healthy, the passing volume is going to be there no matter what. Now, the problem that I actually have is I think the wide receivers that you have to take Mahomes over, when you have to take Mahomes over like a Julio Jones, it puts you in a position later on in the draft where if you're going, okay, I passed on Chris Godwin to get a Patrick Mahomes, and then near the last round of your draft, you're seeing a Jalen Hurts go, and he's going in the same receiver range of someone like, I don't know, I hate to throw out this name, but Nelson Aguilar. I mean, he's going next to no-name receivers, and you go, would it have been better to just avoid the opportunity cost that we have with taking a Mahomes and instead to just go with a quarterback at the very end of the draft? And I honestly think that's going to be the case because I think there are a lot of quarterbacks, if you go through, if you get a Lance, if you get a Jalen Hurts, that can have elite level rushing upside at the very end of your draft. So I don't think this is the year to pay up for Patrick Mahomes. It sucks to say. I will say the one scenario I am fine taking Mahomes is if he falls to you in the 4th round and you took either Kelsey or Tyreek Hill earlier in the draft, or honestly throw in Clyde Edwards-Helaire into that mix. If you took a previous Kansas City Chiefs and you actually wanted to go through and to get that stack and you could accomplish that in the 4th round, then sure, draft Mahomes. But before that, it's going to be really hard for me. And now our next receiver, to be honest, I don't necessarily like Jerry Jeudy or Courtland Sutton, but we're throwing Courtland Sutton onto this list over Jerry Jeudy because, I mean, with Sutton, I will say I do not like the fit with Teddy Bridgewater, and this is someone that I have been beating this drum over the past 2 years now. I'll say we kind of got lucky last year in saying that Courtland Sutton was on our do not draft list because a lot of people go, oh, Mason, this is a Pro Bowl wide receiver, his 2nd season in the league. Are you sure we shouldn't be drafting him? Do you not know that he has some superb talent? And I'm going to go back to the fact that fantasy football is not fair. This is someone that his best season so far in the NFL was in 2019, and he was a mid-wide receiver 3 on a points per game basis. I know a lot of people want to throw out some totals with you, and I'll say if you're ever listening to someone and they're going, this player got this many receptions on the season, he got this many yards on the season, he finished as this receiver on the season, and they're not translating that over to a points per game basis, they're either just not necessarily understanding what matters for fantasy football and predicting year to year, or they're trying to sell you a narrative. They're trying to sell you a point. Because if we're looking at a points per game basis, Courtland Sutton in 2019, his 2nd year in the NFL, was actually a wide receiver 3. And while, yes, he was in a very bad situation with a very bad quarterback, I'll say he wasn't an Allen Robinson. He wasn't a Terry McLaurin. He wasn't in that very bad situation with the quarterback and had no receivers around him and come out and dominate targets and look very effective while doing so. Instead, he was just another receiver on the team. He was someone that definitely was the wide receiver 1 on his team, but he was not dominant. He was not dominating the target share. And now all of a sudden, I mean, they draft Jerry Jeudy. They draft our guy. Y'all know how excited I am about KJ Hamler. We've been excited about KJ Hamler all offseason now. So there are too many mouths to feed. I mean, you have Jeudy, you have Hamler, and you have Noah Fant. If Noah Fant wasn't in this offense, I'd say, sure. I mean, you can have the 3 wide receivers possibly being the Dallas guys. You can have them being a poor versions of Amari Cooper, CeeDee Lamb, and Michael Gallup. However, when you throw Noah Fant into the mix, Noah Fant is also that receiving tight end, and he is extremely talented. I wouldn't be surprised if Noah Fant's right next to Jerry Jeudy and Courtland Sutton in total fantasy points this upcoming season. But at the end of the day, I mean, just taking Sutton in this range, the pie's not going to be big enough in Denver for all these players to be productive. So I'm going to be avoiding Courtland Sutton. And now talking about another monstrous receiver that's scary to avoid because we can acknowledge the fact that he has an elite ceiling, Chase Claypool. So with the Chase Claypool, now one thing that I am worried about, to be completely honest, is the factor that Pat Freiermuth and Najee Harris are going to be adding into this offense. And now I understand, guys, y'all are going to say, well, Mason, you idiot, don't you know they play different positions? And I'm going to come back to you with that and saying what we're having to worry about is this Pittsburgh Steelers offense trying to skew a little more run heavy, indicated by what they did in the NFL draft, and running a lot more 12 personnel where they only have 2 receivers on the field. Because if they only have 2 receivers on the field, based on what we saw last year, Chase Claypool may not be one of those guys. Claypool may not be someone that they want to actually have out there. And that may be getting a lot of Jerry Jeudy and Deontay Johnson involvement. And of course, they're not running 12 personnel that often. They're not going to go out there and run that every play. But I think it takes Claypool from someone that you can safely project to see 85, 90% of the snaps this upcoming season to I wouldn't be surprised if Claypool, I hate to say it, I know a lot of people are going to hate me with this. And trust me, I'm completely fine with the receiver in this mold. But what if we only see Claypool on 3 wide receiver sets? Now, I'm also going to say that you could also see more so a rotation in here, a very similar to thing, but we're expecting with the McCole Hardman. I mean, McCole Hardman, I like McCole Hardman in drafts because he's going like 7 rounds after this. But the reason I like Hardman is because we're going, okay, this is going to be a very pass-happy offense. You're getting a massive discount based on the fact that they're not going to have him on that many 2 wide receiver sets, and people are talking about it. Whereas with the Claypool, I bet you this is the first video that you have ever heard this discussed. I bet you have never heard anybody talking about the fact that Claypool may not be getting as many snaps as you're actually expecting. I think this offense may not be as pass happy as you're expecting. It's going to be a very poor efficiency offense with a Ben Roethlisberger falling apart as well. So Claypool, I mean, it's pretty scary. And now let's go to our 9th player. It's going to be a Raheem Mostert. So here with Raheem Mostert, I mean, guys, I do not understand this whatsoever. Talking about old, crusty running backs, talking about someone that cannot stay healthy, talking about someone that has, keep in mind, Raheem Mostert is 29 years old. This should be the only statistic that matters. He is 29 years old, and he has had one game with over 20 carries in his entire NFL career. That includes the playoffs. That includes the regular season. Raheem Mostert is just benefiting from the vividness bias that a lot of people have from that 2019 playoff stretch where, yeah, the 49ers were fantastic, and Raheem Mostert was a big part of that. And a lot of people remember that stretch because those were nationally televised games, and a lot of people are going, oh, 1 + 1 = 2. Raheem Mostert is the GOAT. No, we have a very large sample of Raheem Mostert never returning value in fantasy. A very large sample. And we have this team going out and trading up to take Trey Sermon. They trade up to take Trey Sermon. It's not like they're sitting there going, oh, okay, I guess best value on the board is Trey Sermon. Let's just bring him in. He can be a compliment to Raheem Mostert. No, they go, we need a running back. We're going to go out there. We're going to move multiple picks because we see Trey Sermon available. He's going to fit our system. While maybe Raheem Mostert's good for the first month, and for the first month, y'all are coming out here laughing at me going, oh my God, Mason, look what you said. Trey Sermon's the starting running back by week 8. Trey Sermon's the starting running back by week 8, and we can definitely go through and we can roster a lot of running backs on our team, so we don't necessarily have to worry about that being a clogger. So get Sermon, not Mostert. And now our last player is going to be someone in that same offense. Let's talk about a Deebo Samuel. So with Deebo Samuel, this is someone that I've actually had to draft in some drafts as of late because I didn't take him at all during the previous drafts that we've been doing this offseason because he fits what the 49ers are doing in no way possible. I will say that with Jimmy Garoppolo, it makes a lot of sense for Deebo Samuel to be a quality receiver because you have to look at the prototypes of the receivers between a Trey Lance and a Jimmy Garoppolo and who's going to benefit. Because we know that Jimmy Garoppolo is a very stationary quarterback. We know that he is not going to be moving around in the pocket that often. He's not going to be getting out of the pocket, expanding time for his receivers to get deep downfield. Instead, he's going to be going through his progressions, and he will be willing to check the ball out to the guy running across the line of scrimmage. Now, however, you actually have Trey Lance as the complete opposite quarterback. You have Trey Lance as the guy that can expand the time that those receivers have to get downfield. He can move around dramatically, and what that's going to allow for is that's going to allow for Brandon Ayuk to get those double moves in, and Ayuk is going to be the receiver that pairs with Trey Lance. Now, I mean, the problem with Deebo Samuel in this scenario is the fact that if you look at Deebo Samuel's average depth of target, if you look at his ADOT, he is literally the worst receiver in the NFL that's getting volume in terms of his average depth of target, and it's not even close. They utilize him pretty much as a running back. He only runs routes across the line of scrimmage, and that is it for Deebo Samuel. That's not going to be a fit with Trey Lance. Trey Lance can look deep downfield. Trey Lance, we saw it in college, how aggressive he was pushing the ball deep downfield, and if that's not there, he doesn't have to check the ball down to the wide receiver running across the line of scrimmage. Instead, he can go out and he can run himself. We already know this. So Trey Lance, I think it's a much better fit with Brandon Ayuk. Deebo Samuel, I think, has a limited ceiling to go along with this. There are very few players in the NFL I would call injury prone, but I can guarantee you Deebo Samuel is one of those guys. And yeah, that's all I got for you, my dudes. Make sure you drop a like on the video. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. If I said something in this video you did not agree with, let me know in the comment section. And yeah, use promo code FLOCK on Underdog Fantasy. The link is in the description of the video for our 2021 rankings, our draft guide, $25 added to your account with a $10 deposit. That's all I got for you, my dudes. Have a great day. Thank you to everybody supporting the show on Patreon. We got some new members in MCGC, Brian, Matthew, Craig, Ian, Woody, Colt, Marcus, Jack, and Nicholas. Thank you, my dudes.